Hello to the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast. You're joined by your usual hosts here, Josh Hartley, Ben Porter.
How we doing?
Yep, that was your cue to say hello.
Yeah.
And tonight we are joined by Jake Dluhy, all the way from Los Angeles. Jake, how are you doing?
I'm pretty well, thanks. How are you?
Wonderful, thank you, and pleased to have you on the show. So you've come on to speak about, this web-based application that you've been developing and working on, and you've got a Kickstarter out on that. So why don't you just quickly tell what's it called and what does it do?
Well, so it's called Warscribe, and I guess in a sentence, it's an application to help people manage map-based campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the likes of your Warhammer Fantasy, Warhammer 40k, I suppose any sort of narrative-based game that might have a need for a map.
That's exactly it. I'm trying to make it kind of applicable to as many different war gamers as possible. And so, like for Warhammer Fantasy, which is kind of my background, and now I'm playing like Kings of War. But yeah, Warhammer 40k, but even historical or all the other sci-fi games out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the cool things about doing this is I've done all this research into like what people might be interested in it, and like just the amount of games out there is kind of staggering. I had no idea personally.
Oh yeah, we're only just starting to scratch the surface ourselves.
There's quite a few new systems coming out this year as well, because you've got A Song of Ice and Fire, the miniatures game. You've got Fallout Wasteland Warfare, and then there's a whole bunch of other boxed games and skirmish games in the works, isn't there?
Yeah, excellent. So, obviously you've got your Kickstarter on at the moment. How long is your Kickstarter running until, and what kind of treats are you offering people for pledges?
Yeah, so it's running until March 4th. Mm-hmm. And as far as like pledge rewards go, the big one that I'm trying to kind of push, or like the main one, is that if you pledge $20, but early bird is $16. As of recording time, that's still available. You'll get the full app when it releases, and you'll get access to the like alpha and beta versions as I develop it. So it's currently available to go on and look at it right now, and so you can start playing at it, and it's kind of a minimal version, but the idea is that as I develop it, people will be able to play it and test it and give me feedback on it. Mm-hmm. And so we can kind of like develop it together. And so part of what I'm trying to do is create this community, because everybody I've talked to about this has a different idea on like what they would like to see in the app and how they would want to run a campaign. And so I want to kind of crowdsource like ideas for what this app should do, and then make it super customizable so that anybody that comes in to play it can kind of make it their own and make it unique to what they want to do.
Sure. No, it sounds exciting.
Keeping it a blank canvas.
Yeah.
It's a good approach.
Because I think one of the things that I found being in Warhammer Fantasy or Age of Sigmar campaigns is the logistics of trying to get 5 or 6 adults to actually have free time or enough free time at the same time to get to someone's house. So having it all based on the internet just seems like a really almost an obvious solution to that.
It's not just that. How many years ago was that? It was about 5 years ago we did the Crimson Skies campaign, wasn't it?
It was 5, coming up 6 years now.
Yeah, so Crimson Skies was a campaign that we did using the Mighty Empires box set for Warhammer Fantasy, if you're familiar with that, Jake.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's the hexes that clip together, and you can paint them up, and you've got mountains and trees and all that. So we had this, but it was a campaign to accommodate 8 players. So we had this 3D map that looked amazing, but was, without a word of a lie, the size and width of a large man. And the problem that we had there, just purely on practical levels, was because it was run out of the Games Workshop store in Glasgow. The map couldn't be out permanently, so I mean it's almost like sort of Laurel and Hardy sketch trying to watch these two poor Games Workshop staffers move this up and down the stairs whenever we were in. And it's one of those things. As nice as it is to have a big 3D map in front of you, it is extremely impractical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Jake, let's say you absolutely. We'll go further than smashing your Kickstarter target. Let's say you had an infinite sort of budget for this. I mean, what kind of features? You mentioned earlier that you're starting to build this community and they're giving you some ideas. So what would be your absolute complete wish list of features to add to this?
Oh man. Well, so one person mentioned yesterday, and I'd already thought about this, but he was talking about okay, I've got this space theme, which you can go on and look right now,
mm-hmm.
but he would want to see something where you could make a mega campaign where you have the space, and then on each individual planet you could bring armies there, and then on each planet you could dive in and you have another map, which is a land-based campaign fighting on the planet.
Jake, this is absolutely uncanny because before we called you,
what we said.
Ben was just saying we were looking at the space theme, and you were saying, "Oh, I wonder if you'd be able to link up the sort of
click
land
on a
base.
planet and then zoom down to the surface to do." Yeah,
oh, man. that would be so cool. And then on the, I guess, historical or fantasy side of that, you've got a big ocean, and
mm-hmm.
you can take ships and go to different islands.
Mm-hmm.
And oh man, I would love to be able to do that. And I was thinking yesterday, I was like, all right, now what would that take technological wise to be able to implement that? And I'm like, I've got a couple ideas, but it might take a bit of time. So I think I'd solve some other things first. But yeah, that would be the dream, is to just create this awesome world building application.
Sounds like you've got some some grand plans for it, but making an application for running and managing campaigns isn't the sort of thing that your average software guy wakes up one morning and decides that he's going to build. So what led you to making Warscribe?
Yeah, well, it's been kind of a long journey. I started playing. My first box set of miniatures was the Lord of the Rings, or the Games Workshop Lord of the Rings, Riders of Rohan versus Uruk-hai
mm-hmm.
starter set.
Nice.
I had one as well. Yeah, they're excellent.
Yeah. And then from that I got into Warhammer Fantasy.
Uh-huh.
And so as this, it's so funny, as this 11, 12-year-old, I was going to the grand tournaments and participating. And I know some people were as a young kid, I didn't have a whole lot of money. And so I bought A, the really cool things, and B, the things where I got high points value for dollars spent. So I had this big...
It's a savvy wargaming shopper right there.
So I played Lizardman, and I had this big death ball of Saurus cavalry with Saurus Old Blood on a Carnosaur and another hero in the unit, and it just would roll across the field, destroying everything in its path.
Yeah, the old character bus, disgusting. Yeah. I hated that. Hugh always ran that.
I was gonna say
5 characters in the front and then the cavalry behind, and you can't do anything to them.
Yeah. I had vampire accounts back in the day when you could have the ultimate cheese of a huge unit of Graveguard and have all the front row being ethereal characters, so that only magic attacks could actually do anything.
So gross.
So was it just Lizardmen that you played in Warhammer Fantasy, or did you spread out to any other factions, or?
Well, I started with Lizardmen, and then After that, I moved to Beastman,
Mm-hmm.
and I painted up. Oh my gosh, I love that Beastman army,
Yeah.
and it was so much fun because I didn't. It was all like the worst units. Like people would take Beastmen for like the Minotaurs and the big monsters, and no, for me it was like 5 herds of like just skirmishers,
Mm-hmm.
like 3 units of centaurs, and I would just like flank and overwhelm everybody. And I took it to a tournament that was like very comp heavy, and
Mm-hmm.
it was called the Fluffy Bunny. And I placed so well in that because like my army on like comp scores did so well, but it just and I think I went like 2-2-1 or something, but it was just so much fun to play. Um, and then I ended up like kind of rage quitting that army when they came out with the new edition of Beastmen and they removed the skirmisher rule from all of them. And I was like,
Oh.
I was like, well, that like takes away like half the fun is
Yeah.
being able to just go wherever I wanted.
Yeah,
And
the Fluffy Bunny, I'm assuming, is named after the bunny from Monty Python's Holy Grail.
yes, it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Or brought to you by Hugh Hefner.
No, this is. I think the Playboy Enterprise has.
Yeah,
I think
loftier ambitions than Warhammer,
well,
I think. Maybe.
yeah, that Venn diagram's somewhat slim. So obviously, other than Warhammer Fantasy, then what other games have you been playing in the past, and what are you playing right now? You mentioned Kings of War earlier.
Yeah, well, so I've kind of taken this circuitous route. Is I played a bunch of Warhammer Fantasy, and then Eighth Edition came out, and I kind of just stopped playing games for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And I like around that time was when I started playing StarCraft, and that was a whole phase of my life where I played a bunch of video games.
Mm-hmm.
But then I went to school, like university.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of towards the end of that, I wanted to get back into miniature games. I was like less into video games. I more wanted that experience of being able to like hang out with people and play rather than just sit in front of my computer. And
Mm-hmm.
and so I started playing War Machine and Hordes. And I guess I haven't gotten rid of that kind of Beastman thought because I ended up starting. I played Kador. I don't know if you're familiar with the game at all.
Yeah, they're like the communists.
They're like the
communists.
communists, like big, like lines of disposable infantry with giant machines behind them.
Yeah.
But I ended up playing them like the one
best
list you
hats in
could
the
play
game.
that was like forest based and like flankers, and I had a bunch of like really crappy infantry that but like they could like come in from the side of the board. So
Loving that skirmish tactic then. With
yeah, yeah, I really am.
I'm sensing that in StarCraft you went for the Zerg rush tactic.
Surprisingly, no. I played Terran, and the reason, so you could actually kind of tie this into it though, is the reason that I like Terran is that like I could be dropping troops or like harassing with like one of my warships behind enemy lines while I attack with my main force. It was like again all these like different directions that you could harass and attack the enemy
Mm-hmm.
with.
Excellent. So, War Machine and Hordes is what you're playing right now. Then, have you ever done pen and paper RPGs at all? Because that was the other thing that struck me about this. The app you're working on, it could work really well for that as well.
I played a couple. It never really got off the ground, but I started playing with one of my friends or a group of friends in college when I was there, and it was good. And it's funny you mentioned like the whole story driven aspect. That's what I was really into in my.
Mm-hmm.
So I would try to get I had like an elf rogue, and I would try to get my elf rogue to just do all these like crazy acrobatic feats, and I'd describe them in like this incredible detail, and then the game master would be like, "All right, well now roll for that." And I'm like, "Oh shoot!"
Yeah, you can't just do it, unfortunately. You have to test.
So, bringing it back to you've just finished university.
Mm-hmm.
You're just getting back into miniatures games.
Yeah.
So what led to the creation of Warscribe?
Well, I kind of had this idea for a while. So I forgot to mention that when I was younger, I played in a couple of campaigns, and I loved them, but everyone that I played in kind of ran into the same problem, which is just, maybe 10 turns in, people's lives got in the way. They couldn't show up to the store to get their moves in, and it just petered out, just stopped going on.
Yep.
And so I thought about that, and when I was getting back into miniatures gaming, I was thinking about like map-based campaigns, and I'd started doing like 3D programming when I was in school. And I just kind of had this idea for like, again, well, based off of the Mighty Empires set. I was like, oh, this hex-based tile system where you've got like mountains and forests and rivers. And so one day I just started, more for like fun than anything else, I just started writing the software that would kind of randomly generate a mountain. Because if you look closely, you'll see that every time, if you refresh the same map multiple times, you'll see that like it just changes a little bit. And that's because every time that the map gets like shown, it generates new like data points to display for the mountains and the rivers, and that's like all based off of
that, because I was like hitting refresh over and over earlier to try and see if I could see the mountains repeating themselves. I couldn't find any.
yeah. So, and that's because like it's a mathematical formula, and then you just add in a little bit of randomness to kind of give it some interesting features. So anyways, I was doing just writing those little visual things for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And last October, the job I was currently working at, it was a startup, and they ran out of money. And I decided, you know what? I kind of want to see if I can take these, just what I've got, visually, and make that into like a full-blown application. And so I just started going for it.
That's really cool. So
yeah,
sort of
excellent.
Born out of necessity and evolved from there.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And and I thought, like, I knew that Kickstarter would be a great medium for it, because so many miniatures games are getting their start on Kickstarter. Like the community is fairly familiar with it. So I thought that would be a good way to, get people interested.
Well, you definitely fit the criteria for Kickstarter,
Mm-hmm.
which is perhaps more than can be said for some of the companies that are using it these days.
We may have a bone to pick with the likes of Cool Mini or not, and
Monolith.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I get that.
But no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, Kickstarter is definitely the project that you're working on is definitely the sort of thing to get that off the ground, as it were. So, just out of curiosity, which college did you go to? Did you stick locally to Los Angeles, or did you go further afield?
So I've kind of actually traveled around a bit. I grew up outside of Chicago.
All right.
In the Midwest, and I went to University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, which is kind of middle of the cornfields, like middle of Illinois,
Mm-hmm.
About 2.5 hours south of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you wound up in Los Angeles. Was that your last line of work? Then I take it that took you to LA.
Yeah, well, I right after school I moved to Austin, Texas, and was there for a year, and then from there, yeah, moved to LA for a job, and that's why I'm here now.
So you spoke earlier on about Warscribe being a bit of a community effort. How can people involved to, or how can people become involved? First of all, to get this up off the ground, and second of all, as a work in progress, how can people participate in Warscribe?
Yeah, well, to get it off the ground, I think one of the great things about miniature games is that like you have these gaming groups of people that come together and play, and the whole point of like running a campaign is to get a group of people together to play these games. And so I'd hope that people that find this interesting, and I've already seen this. Some of the groups I've posted in on Facebook is like people will tag 4 friends and be like, "Hey, like, do you want to use this for our next campaign?" And I think that that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just if you are interested in doing it, try to convince your friends to support the Kickstarter and throw in a couple bucks to make it work.
We'll definitely throw in a link in the description.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
and then,
sorry, carry on.
oh, and then I was just gonna say, and then beyond that, one of the things I've loved is I've gotten so much enthusiasm of people, like I said, with all these different ideas that they would want to see, and so I'm trying to compile all of these ideas into a list, and I'll be if the campaign's successful, I'll be like specifically reaching out and contacting and interacting with the all the backers more. But yeah, just letting me know what you would like to see. There's so many different ideas that people have that I want to make sure that everyone's heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much scope for expansion on this as well. I mean, the first obvious one is adding more themes. You've got the 2 themes at the moment, but you mentioned ocean or islands-based earlier. An underground one would be kind of sweet as well if you were doing like a... Yeah, Ben's a big dwarf player, so that would have a subterranean map for him would work well.
Well, yeah, and my plan, my hope is that I can, throughout the campaign, I can at least make like little, maybe not entire sets, but like one tile from a set for a bunch of these different themes, and then like I can go into the these groups on Facebook. So like I'm like I can go into a sci-fi group and be like, hey, I made a theme that like is on an alien world. Or I can go into I don't know a whole lot about Shadespire, but from my understanding, it's kind of like in an underground kind of an underground city, and so I could go in there and be like, hey, I've got this kind of cool underground theme that you guys might be interested in.
So it's like one big crypt, Shadespire, basically, isn't it?
It's a jolly place.
Yeah.
Plenty of skulls, but I mean that's nothing out of the ordinary for Games Workshop anyway. So
yeah, that's kind of par for the course, I think, for Warhammer. We mentioned just about the start of this podcast that there are a lot of miniatures games coming out this year. What are you most looking forward to?
So I don't know. It's kind of like the 2 big ones I feel like, or at least that I'm aware of, are Song of Ice and Fire, which I think will be interesting. I'm not really crazy about either Starks or Lannisters, so I read somewhere that they're going to be releasing 2 more factions like soon after release, and I'm really hoping for Dorne personally.
No, they've already revealed the 2 factions, and it's going to be another box set. And it is the Wildlings and the Night's Watch.
Okay.
It's an interesting choice. I would have thought they'd have got the Baratheons in there somewhere.
I would have thought so, but or like
the Dothraki,
like Jake's saying, the Dornish as well.
Yeah.
They're a big faction.
I'm sure it's going to be successful enough that we will see all of these at some point.
I think so.
I have no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just looking forward to having a Tyrion Lannister miniature.
Yeah.
I can have the best character in the whole thing just sat on my desk.
Yeah.
And then also Star Wars: The Imperial Assault. I read the stat card for like Darth Vader, and there was something like that kind of triggered this cinematic moment where he like because they mentioned he's slow, but he's got this like special rule where he can move and then attack, and so I just got this idea of like him slowly walking across the battlefield, destroying everything in his path as like everybody comes at him to try and beat him.
Was
and,
it
like,
the Star Wars Legion you're talking about?
Oh yes, yes.
Imperial Assault's the board game, I think, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So Legion.
Yeah.
That's we're looking forward to that as well. It's probably the only universe where Ben wants to be the bad guys.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why would you not want to be the Empire? They've got Darth Vader. They have red lightsabers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy playing the rebel scum, but
because you're normally the bad guy.
Yeah.
And I'm normally the good guy.
We're coming up with very simplistic moral lines here. I'm normal. Yeah, I'm normally the bad guy.
Yeah.
It's funny because like simplistic moral lines is like what Star Wars deals in.
Yeah. Well,
did you hear that, Ryan Johnson?
I think The Last Jedi was all right, and I like that they're moving away from that. But yeah, I know what you mean. It's Star Wars is very good versus evil. Like a lot of science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, you get like the Tolkien high fantasy where it's you're a bad guy or you're a good guy. End of.
You just in general in pop culture though, people are starting to move away from that. I mean, look at Game of Thrones. I think everyone's just a different shade of bad. Well, in that
it's starting to get a bit tiresome though that everyone's a bit of a dick.
Well, the talking about Game of Thrones, that made me think of like one of the things I loved about the books was like they're all written like point of view, right?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody mentioned, I think it was in a Kickstarter comment yesterday, that they would want for the campaign app for Warscribe to be able to like input, background and kind of like flesh out the narrative for each of these empires. And I mentioned that like what I would like to see is the ability for if players are really into it to give them the option to kind of write a quick write-up of the battle for each battle that they play from their point of view. And then at the end, you could like play back through all these battles and all these conflicts and, compare the different points of view between the two nations that fought. And it just kind of reinforces the whole, like, each nation is, fighting for itself and has its own point of view.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you'd really like that as well. You like Ben. You like writing a lot of fluff and reports during a campaign.
Well, that's like match play and competitive gamers have got their tournaments, and the people that are into their fluff and role playing. That's campaigns are bread and butter for players like that. So it absolutely makes sense to have some sort of input where you can enter all of your backstory, and then all the other players can access it there.
Have your own digital book of grudges.
That's it.
Anyway, I think with that, we'll bring this episode to a close. But Jake, thank you very much for coming on this evening. Just remind our listeners again, where can they get access to fund your new project?
Sure, yeah. So if you go to kickstarter.warscry.be, It's a clever little thing I did, but it's basically Warscribe with a period between the I and the B.
Yeah.
And that'll take you to the Kickstarter page. Mm-hmm. And then if you want to check out the app, it's just app.warscribe.be.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thanks once again, and thank you guys for listening to us. So until next time, have a good night, and we'll speak to you soon.
See ya.
Bye.
We are Unlucky Frog Gaming, and I am Ben. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Unlucky Frog Gaming. You can also show your support by giving us money through the Unlucky Frog Patreon. And be sure to check out our website, unluckyfrog.com, to find out more.